It's Kim Hammer, pastor of Saline Baptist Church, community of Tull, outside Benton, with your morning devotion brought to you from the book of Numbers, chapter 33. This is an overview of the 40 years of which Israel spent in the wilderness and where it was that they camped along the way. Moses was commanded to more or less keep a journal of the 40 years of wilderness, which is the recorded word of God, but we're given a kind of a single snapshot in chapter 33 as far as the geographical territory they covered during those 40 years, but also each and every place that they stopped to camp along the way. The chapter begins by telling us that, verse 2, and the Lord commanded Moses, record the stages in their journey. This is the stages of their journey. So Moses has recorded those different stages that the Israelites went through while they were wandering 40 years in the wilderness. It begins by taking a look at where the wilderness journey began, which was in Egypt, and it was the day after the Passover. For verses 3 through 5 says, the Israelites set out from Ramesses on the 15th day of the first month, the day after the Passover. They marched out boldly in full view of the Egyptians, who were burying all the firstborn, who the Lord had struck down among them, for the Lord brought judgment on their gods. A couple things I think that are noteworthy. First of all, we find that the Israelites marched out boldly. This was a people for who 400 years had been whipped down and who had been under the suppression of the Egyptian nation and under the suppression of the Pharaoh, and they had lost their ability to stand boldly. But just in one night after the previous 9 plagues had done their damage, but the 10th one was the death blow, no pun intended, that the 10th plague was the one where the firstborn were going to be killed, and we find that God told the Israelites to offer a sacrifice and to put the blood above the doorpost, and when the death angel would pass by, it would spare the Israelites, or all those that had the blood above the post, and everyone else would lose their firstborn. And so we find that it's the day after which they're going to begin their journey according to the scriptures. How long did they wait till after the 10th plague took place? It was the next morning that they left after the Passover, and they marched out boldly. And only God could deliver them boldly out of the nation of Egypt. You remember when the journey into Egypt started, when it was that they had to go, the nation of Israel had to go to Egypt in order to find food. And this was after Joseph had been sold into bondage by his brothers, and they brought down their daddy, and they were humble when they came into the presence of the Pharaoh, and they never came out from underneath that state of humility because they were always dependent upon the nation of Egypt. Well, now 400 years later, they were going to march out boldly because God was going to deliver them not only from the sins of their past, but also from the bondage of a Pharaoh who did not want to know who their God was, but experienced what it was like to know the punishment of their God. Second thing I want you to notice is that they walked out in full view of the Egyptians. And what were the Egyptians doing while they walked out boldly? The Egyptians were burying their dead. And what a humbling sight it was. In a matter of just a short period of time, perhaps even the last day, the Egyptians went from being the bold ones to being the humble ones, and the Israelites went from being the humble ones to being the bold ones. And only God could do that. Now, he didn't want them to walk out boldly as if to say, look what we did, because the only reason they were walking out was because of what God did. And that's the same for you and I today in the way of a personal application, a life application. Anything that we have to be bold about is not of ourselves, but it's because of the boldness that God puts in us by showing us what he can do if we will remove ourselves and let him take the lead. And so as the Israelites left the nation of Egypt, they left boldly, and they left knowing that God had been in their presence as the Egyptians were burying their dead. But the question is, why were the Egyptians burying their dead? We find that the answer is given to us in these verses 3 through 4, and it says God brought judgment on their gods. Whose gods? The gods of the Egyptians. You remember throughout all the 10 plagues that the Pharaoh looked to his gods to give him guidance and to give him deliverance and to duplicate what God had done. But his gods could not duplicate what God had done in the way of destroying the firstborn of all the Egyptians, which he didn't want to do, first of all, because he sent Moses to warn Pharaoh. But Pharaoh, in his pride, would not give in. He would not acknowledge that Moses' God was the God, the great I Am. And so we find that as a result of it, God brought punishment upon the Pharaoh's gods. Why? Because if he brought punishment upon the Egyptians themselves, the gods would have stood, and they would have said, well, this is by the will of our gods that this has happened. But our God went after their gods, and our gods took their gods down. And God punished their gods by destroying their image, by destroying the reputation that they had, that they could deliver to the needs of the Egyptians, and their gods had failed. And their gods are still failing today. Any god other than the great I Am is a failing god. And God wanted to punish and bring judgment upon their gods because that left the Egyptians with no one else to worship except for gods of failure. And so God punished them. Now, go back over to the book of Exodus chapter 6, and we'll kind of see how what's happening over in Numbers chapter 33 is actually coming into place. So Exodus chapter 6, beginning with verse 6. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from underneath the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being the slaves to them. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with the mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my people, and I will be your God. Then you will know I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from underneath the yoke of the Egyptians. I will bring you to a land I swore with uplifted hand to be given to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. Moses reported this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of the discouragement and cruel bondage. Then the Lord said to Moses, Go, tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his country. But Moses said to the Lord, If the Israelites will not listen to me, why should Pharaoh listen to me, since I speak with flattering lips? Now, go back over to Numbers chapter 33, and we find that in spite of the weaknesses of Moses and the concerns that he had, God said he swore unto Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that he would deliver them into the promised land. And we find now in chapter 33, 40 years later, that promise is about to be fulfilled. God's made many promises to us, and if he would do it for the Israelites as he did fulfilled in his word, whatever he has promised you and me, God is faithful to deliver in his own time. It may be 40 years from now, maybe 40 minutes from now, it may be 4 minutes from now. But God promises something, God will deliver on that promise. We do not need to be like the Israelites were back in the book of Exodus chapter 6 and verses 5 and 6 and not believe God because of the bondage that we're in. We need to believe that God is able to deliver us from the bondage that we're in. And when we believe that he will, then we know that he will, because he will produce the evidence by delivering us from it, just like he did for the Israelites in Numbers chapter 33. We'll pick up here tomorrow and look at the rest of the story. Hope you have a great day.